Go to PressBoxOnline.com and register a youth team in your community for a chance to be highlighted as the PressBox Youth Team of the Month, sponsored by Sports Authority. Go to PressBoxOnline.com for all the details. Welcome back to Inside PressBox. I'm your host, Stan the Fan Charles, joined now by our PressBox NFL draft expert, Matt Zenitz. And Matt, we thank you for being here. And we are, what, about 7 weeks away from the draft right now?
Just a little bit more than a month away.
Yeah. First of all, is this a strong draft overall?
I think so. Yeah, I think, as always, there's intriguing prospects at every position. And obviously the Ravens are a team where, across the board, you can spotlight several different positions and say that's an area where they could look to address that during the course of the NFL draft. So more so than in some other years where maybe the Ravens didn't have a glaring need, this is a very interesting draft.
Well, I read your stuff on the PressBox Royal Farms NFL draft blog or draft report, and the positions that you point out that seem to be most in need are wide receiver still, center, and left guard, correct?
Well, left guard.
Do you include linebacker as a position of need?
Those are just my top three. I think wide receiver is a more pressing need than maybe people realize at this point. Anquan Boldin will be 32 later this year, and aside from Anquan, Torrey Smith, and Laquan Williams, with Lee Evans being released, there isn't a receiver currently on the roster aside from those three guys that had more than 4 catches last year. Or actually more than 1 catch. I just completely lost that. But aside from Anquan, Torrey Smith, and Laquan Williams, there wasn't a receiver with the catch aside from those three guys. Tannen Doss, very disappointing as a rookie. So I think at the very least they'll look to bring in more playmakers at that position.
Are Doss and Reed already afterthoughts?
I wouldn't say afterthoughts. I think Reed may be more of an afterthought than Tannen Doss is, but I think even more than looking to add a playmaker at that position, that it isn't too early to potentially look at an heir apparent to Anquan Boldin with him starting to put on years and him being maybe a little bit past his prime. But left guard, depending what happens with Ben Grubbs in free agency. Center, I think, is a very pressing need. And then, of course, you look across the board. Middle linebacker, they could look to bring in the heir apparent to Ray. Same thing at safety with Ed. And then maybe even another pass rusher.
What do you think of the news that Matt Burke wants to come back and wants to be with the Ravens for his last year? He clearly sniffs a Super Bowl possibility here, something he hasn't had in his career. Is that a good thing for the Ravens?
Yeah, I guess it's a good thing. He's a player who I think is average at this point in his career at the center position, but at the very least, it gives them somebody to rely on right now that they don't need to look at the draft and say, okay, we need a rookie very early on. And center is not a position that is very deep in this year's draft.
Right.
Peter Kahn's an elite prospect at the top end, but this isn't a very deep draft as far as centers go. So it's good for the Ravens because at least if they don't get a center early on, they don't need to depend on somebody later in the draft to come in and potentially be a starter.
If he is there at 29, would you take Kahns?
Well, it depends who else is there, but if they did take him, if I were the Ravens, I would have no problem with that whatsoever. He, first of all, is far and away the best center in this year's draft, but he's also on the same level, I think, as the Pouncey brothers over the course of the last couple of years. An elite interior offensive lineman who has all of the ability and all of the tools to be a perennial Pro Bowler for the next decade or so.
One player that you and I talked about during the Combine was the linebacker from Arizona or Arizona State.
Vontaze
Burfict. Tell us a little bit about him. There were some whispers about some problems with him, character issues, and then
a major problem is Vontaze Burfict put up a similar 40-yard dash number as what I would expect Ken Zales to put up. It's not very good when you go into the NFL draft looking to be a first-round pick and you run a 5.2 and just show up out of shape, looking unprepared, and especially when you're a guy, you compound that with the fact he already had legitimate character concerns, was benched at certain points throughout the course of the last season. So I think he went from being a potential top 15, at the very least first-round pick before the season, to now maybe being a guy that slips all the way to the latter part of the draft.
One other position you don't hear mentioned much for this draft, and I think you know why, but is running back. Ricky Williams has announced his retirement. I don't think any of us feel 100% sure he's going to stay retired, but you like the kid they got last year, Anthony Allen.
I do, but I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever to see them look at the running back position at some point during even the early part of this draft. I don't think they'll get one of the elite guys. I don't think they'll get Trent Richardson, obviously. I don't think they'll end up with David Wilson or even somebody like Lamar Miller, but a name to keep an eye on. Small school guy, blanking on his first name for some reason right now, but Turbin from Utah State, big, powerful runner, put up a decent 40-time athletic kid who I think is a sleeper somewhere in the 2nd to 3rd round range.
All right, read his stuff on PressBoxOnline.com, the NFL Draft Report, sponsored by Royal Farm. He's got updates several times a week.
And Robert Turbin. I was blanking on his first name for some reason.
But I like the kid you talked about, the offensive lineman from Troy. Sounded kind of interesting.
3rd round.
But we got to go. We'll be back with the photo of the week in just a moment. Don't go away. Inside Press Box is presented by Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. Go to Freedmont.com now for all of your mortgage needs.